Hello my dear friends and welcome back to another Bad Batch breakdown. We just got episode 12 Rescue on Ryloth, and as always I'm going to save my full review for the very end. This episode in my opinion was so much stronger than last week's and a wonderful continuation from it as well. I must say it was truly epic and unique in its own way, and I'm so glad that we got more of the Bad Batch in this one, so overall I'm certainly not disappointed. The episode definitely gave us a lot to think about, and in this breakdown I'm also going to reflect on some thoughts that I had prior to the episode and how they've now changed. As I say guys, I'm going to expand on this in my full review after the breakdown. So without much further ado and without any more jibber jabber, let's dive straight into it. Our episode starts back on Ryloth, where the Syndullas have been taken as prisoners by the Empire. Right from the get-go, we have tension between Rampart and Howzer, who is clearly exhibiting doubts about the new Empire. We have to remember that he once served under Cham Syndulla, so naturally he's very divided on how he feels about seeing him locked up with Eleni and Gobi. Now, as many of you pointed out, Howzer likely did not execute Order 66 because there were no Jedi generals on Ryloth. As such, his mind is unaltered, and so naturally he wouldn't be as obedient to the Empire as some of the other clones. But it also poses the question of whether he even had a chip to begin with. We are going to come back to this question later. Now, one thing that Rampart is absolutely obsessed with is finding Hera Syndulla, who, as we saw in episode 11, escaped with Chopper at the end. Rampart decides to put Crosshair and his squad on the mission to locate Hera after an argument with Howzer, who is convinced that neither Cham nor his fighters were the ones who shot Senator Tar. We're going to come back to Ornfrey Tar in a moment, because in this episode we got a definitive confirmation that he survived the shot in the head by Crosshair. Back on the Havoc Marauder, we catch up with the Bad Batch. It was so good to have them back in this episode, and even Gonki was able to get some screen time as Omega was trying to fix his primary power source. Now, there are some huge parallels drawn in this seemingly innocent scene. Omega fixing a droid evokes the image of both Anakin and Luke. It's a tiny nugget of a callback that probably doesn't mean anything, but it's the first thing I thought about when I saw this scene. The Bad Batch receive a recorded transmission from Hera, who begs Omega and the Batch to help her parents. At this point, another major theme of the episode is established, and it's in the form of the conflict between Omega and Hunter. Hunter is mad at Omega that she gave their comm channel to Hera, but Omega reiterates that this is an emergency. When Hunter tells her that they can't help everyone in the galaxy, Omega says, "Why not? Isn't that what soldiers do?" She is persistent throughout the episode to do the right thing whenever the occasion calls for it. Some people might call this naive, and to contrast, the Bad Batch choose decisive carefulness over impulsivity. Either way, Omega convinces them, and so they head to Ryloth, where Hera Syndulla begs the Batch to free her parents from the capital. Hunter warns her though that there are no guarantees. Now back on the capital, Rampart addresses the people of Ryloth, and already the capital looks grimmer under the new Imperial occupation. We get confirmation that Ornfrey Tar is alive and recovering well, at least according to Rampart, so there's no retconning of Lords of the Sith. Nearby, Clone Force 99 observe what's going on, and that's when we see a probe droid spying on them. While Hunter takes it out, it's too late, as the Empire would soon know that Clone Force 99 are on Ryloth. Crosshair notices and reports back to Rampart, telling him of this discovery. What was really intriguing in this episode were the various tensions even within the Empire. For example, Howzer clashes with Rampart because he's doubting the Imperial occupation of Ryloth and even warns of a Twi'lek uprising, and Crosshair clashes with Howzer when he's threatened to be replaced if he doesn't stay on task. Now, I want to take this opportunity to really talk about Crosshair. Just like so many of us, I was pretty adamant that Crosshair was going to turn back to his brothers and have a redemption arc. But I must say guys, this episode has completely changed my mind and made me realise that even if his chipper stopped working after his accident, I think he just naturally despises his brothers. He shows so much anger and spite in this episode, and it seems to be beyond just his chip. I now believe that Crosshair is probably going to die at some point in the series, and he might be unsalvageable. It's such a shame, but I think that's the way it is. In the next scene, Howzer's doubt gets the best of him, and he decides to fight for Ryloth and betray the Empire. He goes where the Syndullas are being held captive and tells them that he will protect Hera if they just tell him where she is. But the Syndullas doubt his allegiance, and Cham doesn't want to tell him since he's betrayed them before and does not want to put his daughter in danger. Back Back on the Havoc Marauder, Hera and Omega convince the batch to rescue the Syndullas. Their plan is really clever. It's to create a divergence whereby instead of predictably attacking the capital, they will go for the Imperial refinery, where the only defense they have to get through are the perimeter cannons. While Chopper goes into the refinery to disable the cannons, Echo and Hunter will scale the capital walls. I must say, in the next scene, Chopper is a tactical badass, but we run into a familiar astromech droid which looks identical to the one that the Martez sisters had. Hera and Omega sneak into one of the shuttles, and we have a lot of foreshadowing for Hera's future in Rebels with the Ghost. In the shuttle, while she is shaky with the controls, Hera is able to pilot it and take out the cannons. Back at the capital, Echo and Hunter rescue the Syndullas, and on their way out, Howzer stops them to warn them that they're walking into a trap, since Crosshair and his squad are waiting outside. While they don't trust him at first, Howzer admits that he's on their side, and he makes amends with Cham and Eleni. Something really telling in this scene is that Howzer calls the clones good men, in spite of everything they've done under the influence of the new Empire. This solidifies my thoughts that he didn't have a chip to begin with, or alternatively, he just never heard Order 66 being activated. And then, my friends, we get the biggest scene of the episode. Howzer confronts the troopers on his own. He gives an impassioned speech telling them to join him in refusing to follow orders. He throws his blaster down, and what happens next is what's really surprising. Some of the clones actually joined him and threw down their weapons. This tells us something we didn't previously know about the inhibitor chips. They seem to be wearing off for some clones. Crosshair from a distance commands that those clones be arrested for being traitors. Along with Howzer, they're taken away. We'll find out what happened to them next week, but this is definitely not the last time we're going to see Howzer. Once the rescue happens, Hera and Omega part ways, and the emotional goodbye confirms that we're probably going to see them reunite further down the timeline, probably in the Mandalorian universe, most likely the Ahsoka Tano series. And so the final scene is extremely ominous. Crosshair asks permission from Rampart to hunt down the Bad Batch, and this is granted. Now, as I said, Crosshair seems beyond saving. While I would love a redemption arc for him, he appears too far gone. But one thing is for certain, we are in for one hell of a final few episodes. So that, my dear Megalorians, is the breakdown, and now I want to share some thoughts with you about the episode on the whole and where it's leading. I'm going to start with the pacing, which was spot on, and I love the intensity of the episode. For once, it felt like the right length of time, and it didn't feel rushed in any way. As for my rating out of 10, I'm going to give this one a solid 8, because it felt the most Star Wars-y compared to recent episodes. In my opinion though, nothing compares to the first episode, the premiere Aftermath. Now this brings me on to the Kaminoans. I think it's really interesting that we haven't seen them in the last 3 or 4 episodes, but I really want to find out what's going on back on Kamino. Evidently, Lamasu has failed to get Omega back, but we have to wonder if they've given up that pursuit or not. I covered extensively the possibility of a Kaminoan uprising, and if we are going to see it, it'll be episode 14, War Mantle. I presume that Tarkin is dealing with Kaminoan negotiations, and we haven't seen him in a while as well. But going back to this episode specifically, I really don't have any criticisms. I'm a huge Rebels fan, so these last 2 episodes, which function as an arc, was such a treat. They were really a prequel to Rebels, and I will say that I'm aware that some of you haven't even seen Rebels. I highly recommend that you do, especially if you enjoyed the previous 2 episodes. I found it to be a really interesting choice that they chose to not kill off Eleni, but there still is time. We know that she dies around this point in the timeline, but I guess that Dave Filoni might not want to show that on screen. Then again, we're probably not done with Ryloth just yet, as the Bad Batch might go back and rescue Howzer. Next week's episode is called Infested, which is very ambiguous. I'm not too sure what that's going to deal with specifically, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. But I like the way that these past 2 episodes have really picked up the pace for the series. I feel like we're more or less where we need to be if this series is going to have multiple seasons. But I now turn it over to you guys. What did you think of episode 12? What are your marks out of 10? Leave your comment down below, and thank you so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed today's video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're brand new, and a huge welcome if you are, and also be sure to check out my Patreon, which is in the description down below. Otherwise, I'm Star Wars Meg, wishing you all a phenomenal rest of the day, no matter where you dwell in the galaxy. Have a good one.